Hello everybody and welcome to the MerwinMusic YouTube channel. Stick around and watch me build this DIY speaker cab. So I started this build by finding this home theater speaker from Salvation Army. This one is rated for 125 watts, so it puts out a fair amount of sound. I designed my cabinet based on the original speaker enclosure in Google SketchUp. Next, I cut some 3/4 inch plywood to the right size based on those plans. This will vary depending on your speaker sizes if you're going to build this yourself, so you can use the same dimensions I used or change them to fit your needs. Then I glued up the main box of the speaker cab using butt joints and clamps, and then checked to make sure the box was square by measuring the diagonal corners. Now, since butt joints like this are not the strongest connection, I came back after the glue had dried and drilled out 3/8 inch holes to fill with 3/8 inch dowel rod. This makes the joints a lot stronger but doesn't put any screws or nails in the edge that would get in the way when we round over the edges. Next, I cut some strips out of my plywood that were 1.5 inches wide to be the face frame of the cabinet, and then cut those to length and glued them onto the box. Once that was dry, I measured where I wanted the control panel to be on the top of the amp. Mine was about 2 inches wide and about 1.5 inches away from the back and sides of the cabinet. Then I drilled a hole in each corner of that outline that I marked and connected the dots with my jigsaw. Then I cleaned up the hole with a rasp and then gave the whole cabinet some sanding. Then using a 1/2 inch roundover bit in my router, I rounded over all the outside corners of the box, as well as the control panel hole. You can see here the effect that this gives to the cabinet, which, as well as looking nice, it makes the standard protective metal corners that you see on most amps fit properly. Now, unfortunately, since the plywood that I'm using is probably older than I am, I had some spots with some blowout. Now, a dent like that will show through the Tolex, so I filled it in with some wood filler and then gave the whole thing a good sand again. Then I took a 1/2 inch thick piece of MDF and cut it to size to be the front panel of my speaker cabinet. This panel is what the speakers will attach to. So I laid out an inch border around the edge and then placed the speakers on and found an arrangement where they all fit, keeping in mind that I also need a 4-inch hole for the airflow from the cabinet. Then I tried to use this hole saw bit to cut out the speaker holes, but that didn't really work too well and my drill battery died. So instead I cut them out with a jigsaw. You want to make sure that you cut your holes big enough that they don't obstruct the speaker, but small enough that there's overlap for you to screw the speakers into. Then I gave the front panel one coat of black spray paint just so the brown MDF color wouldn't show through the speaker cloth. Back at the table saw, I cut out the back panel for the cabinet out of 1/2 inch plywood, as well as 2 strips roughly 4 inches wide that will sit like so in the cabinet, and with the back panel will create a enclosure for the electronics. So I glued and nailed those 2 pieces together and glued some brackets to help screw that whole piece into the cabinet. Lastly, I cut up 4 little triangles to glue into the back corners of the cabinet. I used a scrap from the same plywood as my back panel to inset the corners a 1/2 inch from the edge. These corners will hold the back panel flush with the back side of the cabinet, as well as being what we will use to screw the back panel into. And with that, the main build of the cabinet is done. If you like this video or have any thoughts on how you would have built this differently, I would love to hear those from you in the comments below. And in the next video, we'll draw the holes for the hardware and get to covering this cabinet in some Tolex.